Mostly I remember the people being put out in the street,
Yes.
those who couldn't cope. And I remember passing by and looking at belongings in the street and just standing there staring, because having this thing sink into me that people were in the street because they couldn't pay the rent.
Yes.
And looking at, wondering would that ever happen to us.
Yes.
And I remember once a lady, was a man, came by, and he was talking to himself, and he's looking at all these things in the street, and then he went up a few blocks, and I understand he shot himself.
Oh, I see.
And then I remember seeing two people take something like an oilcloth, this was right on, and cover up the people's beds and things that were in the street, because I don't know why that happened, where the sheriff could put you in the street.
Yes.
So that the things wouldn't get wet in the rain.
Oh, wow.
And things like that. Those pictures, I remember just staring and looking at them. And then later I remember standing in some kind of line, because we also were eligible to get cod liver oil and something else. And you stand in the line, and they would give you something like I don't know if it was by a spoon or a cup, but you get a tablespoon of cod liver oil.
And what was the purpose of the cod liver oil?
So that you wouldn't, I don't know, you got cod liver oil and something else to keep from getting colds or getting sick or something. And I remember they told me I had rickets. Then I found out that was lack of vitamin C. That's some other thing, and that also I used to have epileptic seizures when I was very young.
So the cod liver oil was good for that?
I don't know what, I just remember hints of it, and I remember being put in water. I remember keys being put in my mouth and such things as that. And I remember standing on a line and seeing and watching, looking up at a man's white shirt in some kind of line and seeing a bed bug crawl up his shirt. Just watch this bed bug, because in poverty, there's one of the things, there's no such things as bed bugs today.
Yes.
But they were there then.
Yes.
And people with large houses, to make ends meet, they rented rooms and all kinds of, and I remember my mother, it seems like she was always fighting dirt and sweating and ironing, and the sweat from her forehead would fall off her nose and hit the I remember that sound and everything, and I would watch to see when the drop would fall. And I remember her sewing on a sewing machine, and having us pick up pieces of thread off the floor so that she could finish whatever it was she was making. It was something black, I remember. And then I remember my mother, helping a neighbor, lending them food and baking stuff and taking next door to somebody. And I remember we weren't supposed to answer the door, so we said, who is it?
Yes.
And if it was the landlord, you're supposed to say, well, your mom's not home. Mm-hmm. And nobody's home. And I remember one time, the landlord did come to the door, and it was something, and Mother invited him in. We were practicing. We were going to go in another room, because she was telling us she had to talk to Mr. Austin. He was a West Indian, because then our landlord was black, because for a long time the real estate in Harlem was, I don't know if it was black owned, but it was black controlled by blacks here. And but I understand that he wanted to hear us play the piano. So my sister and I played a duet for him, and because he didn't want us to be excused. And then when we finished, Mother, she had us go excused excused us, and then Mr. Austin left after a while, and their mother was crying. We came back and she was crying, and so we were wondering, why was Mother crying, you know? And she was crying because Mr. Austin had forgiven her so much month's rent that she didn't have to pay. So then I knew we weren't going to be put out in the streets, you know.
That must have been some pretty good piano playing.
I don't know, but I remember that. And then I remember hearing her tell my father about it, Mr. Austin, and my daddy swearing. I just remember this. I was quite young then. I'm mixing up times because I can't sort it all out. And then my daddy crying and saying he would never let that happen again. That he would never. He said he didn't care what he did. That she wouldn't have to worry. That he wasn't going to let us get put out on the street.
Sounds like a very responsible man.
Yes, but anyway, those were some of the times and the talks and playing for people, you know, there was no television, we didn't have a radio. People came to your house, the children entertained, you know.